Well, the role of Abahlali, the Shareholders Movement of South Africa, in the coalition of the poor in Durban is one of the most significant role to actually unite the poor and the working class. So the movement is playing a very leading role in making sure that the coalition itself is strong. And the coalition can only be strong when we, as leaders of the coalition and all members of the coalition, have built a strong foundations on individual organizations. So it cannot just be a coalition without us strengthening the shareholders movement on its own, without us strengthening the street traders. It cannot be strong without us strengthening the hostel dwellers and environmental activists, the fisher folks, the right to know, the migrant communities, all these individuals, organizations that are part of the coalition, including trade unions, needs to be strong on their own. It's only when that strength comes together in a form of a coalition, then we can actually tackle all the challenges, including the socio-economic rights that are troubling this country, but also it is the only way we can dismantle the systems of capitalism that renders us homeless, that throws us into deep poverty and so on. So the role of Abahlali, because we are clear about the need to unite the poor across color lines and across the globe. Hence, the coalition of the poor becomes a significant formation for us to start off with. And in that formation, we should also expand the coalition to include students. For instance, the fees must fall, to include some of the formation that we still need to identify who are not necessarily part of the coalition. And the coalition should not just be a Durban-based coalition. I'm happy that we are now at the level of the province of KwaZulu-Natal. But our task is to go beyond that at the national level, regional level, and global level. When the
uboshwe nje because of the councillor want you to be arrested. Akhetha abantu abangukuthi bafanele ukuthi bakuvulele icala. Yiyo lento lengibona ukuthi mangabe singama movements sihlangana ndawonye sikhuluma ngalizwi linye. Into yokuqala fanele beyenze ukushintsha umthetho lo engubhekile manje. They did it ukuthi singakwazi like ukubuyisa umhlaba wethu back. Bathi sitshontsha umhlaba masingaqala silwe nendaba ukuthi akushintshe isystem umthetho lo obekiwe ama court ashintshe, then sibuyele esystemini yethu yesintu. Ngibona ngathi lapho sizokwazi khona ukuthi silwe necapitalism, sikwazi ukuthi sibuyise kakhulu isocialism, because masihleli phansi sikhuluma in experience yami lokho like sikwenza ithina singabahlali sihlale phansi sikhulume izinto ilapha ngibona khona ukuthi izinto eziningi ziyasebenza. Kusho ukuthi complaint yami kakhulu isemthethweni lo wenziwe, because lo mthetho besingekho wenziwa asiwazi ukuthi ukhande ubani and we are using it. And then masebenzisa lo mthetho kanjalo yiwo umthetho osuku sibuyisele emuva singakhona ukuthi singabantu sikwazi ukuthi simele.
The force that we are confronted with is it's very big. It's international. It is therefore important that we start building regional but also international solidarity while being realistic, because we must be very clear that we build democracy from below. Some people miss that point. They suddenly want to become big while they are detached from the reality of the people, of ordinary people on the ground. So from a Bahlali perspective and from the perspective of the coalition is really to make sure that we build strong foundation and slowly from below, slowly build onto that, and then on the side build alliance, start identifying alliance and partners, because this is a big war, it's a global war. Hence you need alliances, coalitions of coalitions. That's only the way we can dismantle the challenges of capitalism.
Thank you. So it's always good and well to know what are our challenges, how do we identify them, but of course that is only as useful as what we can think about as it relates to the way forward. So the question of what is to be done, what should we be doing, is of course the central question that we should be asking. Really the point of having this kind of historical, theoretical analysis is to ask the question about like what are the kind of ways in which we need to build a revolutionary praxis. Praxis in the sense of something that combines ideas with actual practical questions and things that we need to do. And here I think there are a couple of elements that are important. Number one, we have to recognize that what is the enemy we are up against, whether it takes an expression of a police force that is aggressively destroying houses or a capitalist class that wants to continue making money in a crisis. The enemy we are up against is not an enemy that is isolated to one small part of life. It is international, it crosses borders, there are people there are companies. If you go, whether you're sitting in Johannesburg or Lusaka, you find very similar companies that are making a profit in the malls and in the various spaces. So
well, I'm pleased that the question of the poor is being addressed. Let me say that first. And the way to do that is to bring the leadership among the poor. There are many organizations and movements like the one Abahlali Basem Jandolo, and there are several other church-based organizations, but there are also organizations outside the church who would be willing, I believe, to come together and to discuss ways and means of strategizing, of overcoming poverty. That's probably the most important way. In other words, to do it through a process of consultation. We involved in them. The other is for say religious organizations and other NGOs to take the initiative themselves and to look at their own finances and their own strategies and so on, and then say, how can we make this available to the poor in our communities? Because all religious organizations have a fundamental belief in caring for the poor, whether it be running feeding schemes and so on. But I personally am of the opinion that we should create jobs so that they generate that income for themselves.
Problem esibhekene nayo kule nkululeko yiyo leyo. Now ungase ufise okokuthi ungesithina swakho ungase ufise lokokuthi uthi ungathithi kulesi simo esikusona kwakungcono nakuqala kunamanje. Ungase ufise ukuthi usho njalo. Why uzofisa ukuthi engathi kwakungcono kuqala kunamanje? Because nomahluko usawuboni. Umahluko lo inkinga ongawuboni ukuthi kahle kahle yini umahluko la. Yini umahluko la? Ngabe senkululekweni kodwa ngahlala kwi situation worse than eyayikhona back then. Situation yaqhubeka yaxaka engihlezi kuyo kune situation eyayikhona ngesikhathi obaba besaphila. Kwenziwa yini? Kanti kuzoba nini thina simasha? Kuzoba nini thina simasha? Kuzoba nini thina kanti sihlangene la sishiya amakhaya ethu sihlangene la ngoba azitholakali lezi zinto esizifunayo? Azifiki emadlebeni abo. Kodwa ekuseni kusasa billions and billions of rands they are gone. Namhlanje masiyolala sizobe sizizwa lezi zinto. Lezo kufanele ngabe zisevisa thina. Yabona. Semaphaketheni abantu. We must clap hands, God. Sithi sikwi-New South Africa. Problem esibhekene nayo.
Ubunyewa Mostel is an organization that was formed in 2015. The reason of forming the organization was the founders of the organization back then. They saw the struggle that the people of the hostel was living in, you know, in terms of poor service delivery, you know, the conditions they were living in, you know, inhumanity. And the issue of the rent in those hostels was also the problem at that time, of which still the problem is today. And then the other thing is creating the organization was also the way of creating unity amongst the hostel in KZN, because you will remember back in the day, these hostels were governed, if I may put it that way, by some political parties. For example, you go to Amash hostel, that hostel was dominated by Inkatha Freedom Party, even now. And you go to T-section, that hostel is being dominated by Inkatha Freedom Party. You go to Kipland's hostel, the hostel is being dominated by the ANC. So back in the day, if you're staying in Kipland's hostel, you cannot go to Amash hostel because of those political differences. So then the founders of the organization see the need that, no, you know, we need to sit down and come together and leave now the politics behind so that we can focus on the poor hostel dwellers. So they come together. They decided, you know what, we need to leave the politics behind now so that we can focus on the things that matters in the hostels. So UPH, that is how it was born. So in the organization, you will find ANC members, you will find IFP members, you will find, like, we've got all those political parties within the organization. But when we are in the UPH, we leave all those political flags behind. So we focus on the right of the poor hostel dwellers. So politics, we leave them behind us. So that is how UPH was born, and even now we still got challenges in the hostels because leadership of UPH has been, you know, changing as time goes on. The founders of the organization, some retired, some died, you know. So the leadership keeps on changing, but we still have leaders that have been with the organizations since day one, like the chairperson and the deputy chairperson of the organization. They are also the founders of the organization, you know. So now that division that was created by the politics among the hostels now, I would say that UPH has done a good job on creating unity among the hostels, because now a guy from Cliplands Hostel, which is an ANC a member, can go freely to Wamash Hostel, you know, without fear that he will be killed or something. But now the problem that we're facing in those hostels now is that some things were never changed, you know. So our government does not want to listen, because there are some things that were never changed. For example, the poor service delivery. Such are things that we've been complaining about for the past 15 years, and we're still complaining about even now, you know. And the violence in the hostels. Those are the other things that are still challenging us, because you will hear from the newspapers and from the radios that, you know, people from the hostels are like this and that and that. People from the hostels are always being painted like people that are violent and the stuff, but that is not the case. In the hostels, there are educated people, you know, very good people that are staying in those hostels, but because of their rights are being violated, they cannot say anything. So people that violating their rights will say, no, those people from that hostel are violent, they are criminals, and so on. And people are very easy to believe false information.
Mina igama lami ngumuzi ngwaNtuli, ngihlala khona la kuleli hostel. Leli hostel ke lisemlazi kwa T section. So ke ihostel senginesikhashanyana eside nje ngihlala kulona kusukela nami ngisafunda isikole. So ke uma ngabe sihleli lana kune ama challenges amaningi nje esibhekana nawo. Ungacanda uzothi mangabe ubuka lezi zindlu uyabona ukuthi ezinye indonga zakhona zicrackile, iroof iphukile, khoma ukuthi izindlu lezi zakudala ezina more than 50 years. So ayikaze ezeshintshwe lokhu nje zaba nje. So ke iyona ke inkinga esinayo lena ne overcrowding. So sigcwele kucinene kakhulu la kuleli hostel. So ezinye izinto ke esihleze sikhala ngazo. Wena okunye ke umasipala akakhona ukulimaintain ihostel. Ama hostel nje wonke akawa maintain umasipala. So kodwa egcineni irent iyafuneka. Ezinye ke zezinto ezisihlukumezayo lezo kakhulu.
So ke siyafisa ukuthi ngelinye ilanga ngoba sasinenkolelo ukuthi uma ngabe singena kwi-democracy uhulumeni wethu nje uqala into ayoyiprioritize iwona ama-hostela kodwa kubukeka kungenzeki lokho. Thina njengabahlali nje basemahostela sibukeka sitreateka njengabantu nje abangabalulekile. So siyafisa ukuthi nathi njengabahlali basemahostela sitreateke njengabanye abantu abahlala kuma-suburbs nakobanibani. So ke yizo lezo zinto esiyifisayo kakhulu. Njengobona nje kunezingane lezi ezingaka ezidlala lana abanawo akho ngisho icrash la. So ziyaphoqeleka ukuthi sithathe izingane lezi ziweza umgwaqo ziye kwamanye ama-section ko D section. So ezinye izinto ezingama-challenges labantwana siyabadinga bafuna uma bekhula kusasa babe izinto ezibalulekile nabo empilweni kodwa uma singakwazi ukuba developer besebancane bebangaka ukuze bekwazi ukufunda nokubhala ezinye izinto ezisinikeza ubunzima lezo. So ke lezi zindlu lezi ngoba sikhuluma ngazo lezi ukuthi zigugile zicrackile udonga lungawela phezulu komuntu nominini izinto lezi esike sayireporta ikhathe eziningi kwamasipala kodwa kaze kwenzeke lutho. Sike sayireporta nakwi-province kwa-human settlement sibatshela ukuthi abazobuka izindlu esihlala kuzona kodwa kuzobe namhlanje akaze kwenzeke lutho. Kuyimanje kufanele ngabe sibe nomhlangano ne-department yakwa-human settlement kodwa kuze kube namhlanje bayabaleka umhlangano bokufanele ngabe sibe nawo last month nge-23 kaMarch kodwa kuze kube namhlanje balokhu bebalekile. So izona-ke inkinga esibhekene nazo siyafisa ukuthi ugovernment wethu ukusuka ku-national ama-hostela nje akabe wathathe njenge-top priority bazi ukuthi abantu abahlala lapha kuhlala abantu abaphilayo nabo abanemndeni. So ilezo zinto esiyidinga kakhulu ukubona. Uma ngabe sikhuluma ngalezi indaba zethu ekunye siye sikudinge sesibona ukuthi uma ngabe simasha singamahostela kunezikhalazo zethu esihambisa kwamasipala sigcina kwesisikhathi uthola ukuthi sifike sahandova memorandum ingabuyi impendulo. So uma ngabe sisithi siyabafonela senze follow up ugcina ubona ukuthi silokhu sibanjisa udongo. So ke size saphoqeleka ukuthi ke sisebenzisane namanye ama-civil formations just ukuthi sikwazi ukuthi izwi lethu okungenani libe namandla ngoba siyakholelwa ukuthi uma ngabe sihlangana nezinye inhlangano ezifana nabahlali basemjondolo right to know no poor flat dwellers o-ACM inhlangano esebenzisana nazo mhlawumbe uma ngabe sesiphuma kuthiwa siyamemeza sikhuluma ngezwe elilodwa uzokwazi ugovernment ukusizwa asukumele phezulu ngoba into esikholelwa kuyona ukuthi umuntu ohlala ehostela nomuntu ohlala emjondolo umuntu ohlala eflatini impilo zethu ziyafana. Ukuhlupheka kwethu kuyafana. So ingakho ke sikholelwa ukuthi uma singasebenzisana sisonke sindawonye sikhulume ngezwe elilodwa ku-government owodwa sizozwakala. Ileyo nto ebiyenza ukuthi sithande ukubamela. So ke uma singakwazi ukuhlangana kahle nalezi inhlangano ngiyakholwa ukuthi kungaba yenye into mhlambe engenza ukuthi sikwazi ukuthi uma simemeza kunciphiseke nezinga le-corruption iningi kakhulu la egcina i-affecta thina siyisonke singabahlali. Esithi uma ngabe sithi siyamasha ukuthi sesidibana ne-policy brutality bezosihlukumeza benze zonke lezi zinto basithengele iy'nkabi ukuthi zizosibulala. So ezinye izinto lezi esikwazi ukuthi sibhekane nazo uma ngabe sikhuluma sibaningi bazi ukuthi uma ngabe kumasha la emgwaqweni akusikho ukuthi kugcwele abantu basehostela kuphela kodwa kukhona nabantu abaqhamuka kwezinye indawo abaqhamuka komjondolo nabaqhamuka emafletini nabadayisi basemgwaqeni. So ingakho-ke sikholelwa ukuthi ukusebenzisana nalezi ezinye iy'nhlangano kungasilekelela ngoba futhi-ke enye into esuke yenzeka umuntu osuke exoshwa la ehostela uhamba ayohlala emjondolo ngokunjalo nosuke emjondolo osuke ecabanga ukuthi uthola indawo engconywana ubuya azohlala la ehostela okusho ukuthi impilo yethu iyafana. Ngokunjalo futhi nalaba ngoba nenyunyana zabasebenzi siyasebenzisana nazo. Into esuke yenza ukuthi sisebenzisane nazo ileyo ukuthi abahlala la emahostela abasebenzi uma bephuma ngaphandle beyinkampanini. So ingakho ke sifuna ukuthi kube nobudlelwano ngoba siyathanda ukuthi uma ngabe besuka la bey'endaweni zabo zokusebenza bengahlukumezeki ingakho sisebenzisana nezinyunyana zabasebenzi. So ilokho khona esikhala ngakho kakhulu esikufisayo nje ukuthi ugovernment wethu akasukumela udaba lwasemahostela aluthathe nje lube yi-top priority azi ukuthi kunezinto eziningi amahostela ethu kufaneka maintainwe ukuze sizokwazi ukuhlala kahle ngoba uma ngabe ubuka lezi zindlu nje la eduze kwethu akuyona indawo engahlala umuntu o-right le. Ugovernment usakhe izindlu eziningi obezakha ngaphandle kwamahostela ezibizwa ngo-rent to own. Abantu bakhona labantu bahlala mhlambe 5 years renta lapho emva kwalokho leyo ndlu sekuyakhe kodwa thina la emahostela sineminyaka more than 50 years abantu behlala lana they are still renting. So leyo nto ayisinikezi ilungelo lethu eliphelele njengabahlali base-South Africa. Yezi izinto lezi sifuna ugovernment akasibhekelele nje kuzona. So ke siyafisa ukuthi ngelinye ilanga uma ngabe sikhuluma singabahlali basemahostela noma sihlangene nezinye inhlangano ugovernment akebe nesikhathi sokuzosilalela nje singabantu kebe yeke ukuyithwala bayithwele kakhulu government wethu kodwa kugcine njengoba kuyiwa kuma elections nje manje bazobe bengena la begijima in and out la bezofuna ivoti kodwa mangabe sekufanele kuzi development emva kwama elections sebe nombani sephuma ngendlela yakhe sebeyohlala endaweni zabe zobukhazikhazi so izo ke lezi zinto esikhala ngazo kakhulu la eMaustel.
We want to build a social movement.
Yes.
How can we build a social movement? Who can we unite? Which other organizations can we bring together?
We can bring all organizations. Like now we are working together with Abahlali baseMjondolo, Right to Know, Poor Flat Dwellers, and SAFTU, and street traders. So those are the organizations that we are working with right now, and we are still expecting another organizations who are willing to work with us. Because if you are talking to our government, like Abahlali baseMahostel, they don't take serious. But we believe that if we can call all those organizations, it might be easy to engage with the government. So that's why we are appealing to all civil organizations to come closer so that we will challenge these together. Yes.
Fees Must Fall may have not been necessarily similar to 1976 protests, but there are similar characteristics that manifest themselves within the movement, because the issues that were raised by students are issues of national question, the question of land, the question of transformation in the country, the question of decolonization in the country, of which I think those are the most fundamental issues that were raised by the student movement. And then moving towards the South Africa that we live in now. And I think that students have always been at the forefront, particularly social movements, into shaping the national discourse, because we believe that the political establishments or the political parties that are presented in parliament, they are issues that they're really not being touched on. As I said earlier about the national question, there are questions that that remain unresolved. The injustices that we continue to live with. So, and I think that that's where the Fallist movement come in and trying to to push a conversation going, and obviously to push the government and force the institutions to to accommodate, because now it was as if black people want to be accommodated in these institutions of higher learning, because higher education is something that should be accessed by particularly black people, because we know that they often disproportionately affected by lack of funding, financial constraints, and also we understand the migration that have to go through in order for them to access the universities, because most universities are actually located in cities, big cities. So on its own, it creates expenses for them to be, in a different space. And that on its own, universities do not seem to be, and government as well does not seem to be coming and assisting students in terms of trying to be into that space because of finances and many, many other issues for them to be able to access higher education. So those were among the factors that were raised by, the Fallist movement, the fees must fall, because it was not necessarily to say that we want education to be free. Yes, we all want education to be free. It's a call that has been there for over years, but it just goes beyond, it's just something that where we want to transform the institution in itself, because the institution really represent, the white supremacist point of view or an understanding of the world, and that's when the fees must fall movement comes in. I took part of it, and there were a lot of experiences that we've taken from it, such, the state violence, the state brutality, and, the balkanization of institutions and militarization of the universities in combination between universities themselves and government. No one was willing to come to the party and actually find amicable solutions. So the future is that working class people and the people in the communities are the future, and those are the people who do not conform into the political party disciplines and code of conduct. It's people whom we believe that their future of South Africa right now really lies with them, because they should be able to mobilize and be organized against all the social ills and the socio-economic and geopolitical conditions of South Africa.
Secretary of the Market Users Committee and the Provincial Secretary of the South African Informal Traders Forum. We form part of the Coalition of the Poor in KZN, which is one of the greatest formations in the history of civil society on the ground. The Coalition of the Poor is made up of several grassroots organizations, all of which exist in their own autonomy. Every organization specializes in a certain field of work, a certain area, and each of the organizations within the coalition have mastered the work around what it seems to represent, or what it intends to represent. The Coalition of the Poor has people that are represented from street traders to people who live in hostels, the people that live in informal settlements, people who struggle for environmental justice, and people that are from beyond the borders of South Africa. The Coalition of the Poor is one of the most inclusive formations that does not seek to divide and is constantly building and progressing towards improving the lives of the majority of South Africans. This is one structure where nobody is excluded. We look at everyday issues from the bottom up. There is no thing of dominance. There is always something that someone, an ordinary passerby, can find in the coalition that is of benefit to their communities. To belong to the Coalition of the Poor is strength in itself. Knowing that you belong to a group that have the interest of every single human being at heart. When we look at the coalition, people would say, what is this coalition? Who are they? What do they stand for? But I think more importantly is to look at what the coalition does. The impact of their work and the reach. There have been no boundaries for the coalition. When the coalition decides that we will stand together, there are no divisions. We will find that people off the street will be supporting people in the settlements. And when people in the settlements have an issue, it will be people from the hostels who turn up at the settlements. And in civil society, there are several formations. each specializing in something. But this coalition is special. It is special because it brings people together. It unites everyone who wishes to be part of it. You have somewhere to belong. You have somewhere to call home. You have somewhere where there is always a shoulder to cry on. Very important in this coalition is knowing that you are leaders, are people who have not just turned up here yesterday. They are leaders with a wealth of experience in the areas in which they work. And they are not people that have claimed to be powerful or people that we even refer to as powerful. They are ordinary people that make you realize that you
government has failed, has betrayed the people of this country, in particular the poor and the working class. And by working together with the trade unions and everybody else, we're able to exert enough pressure on the government and obviously then take ownership and then get delivery for the people that is so much needed in this day and age. That these chemical companies close, it gives us hope that a better life can be achieved. We don't need petrochemical, we can't eat chemicals, we can't eat money, but if we've got the land, we can certainly do a lot on the land. So that's why the land is so important, and we are saying that the land must be given back to the people of this country so that we can determine what's our future and not let others determine their future. The system, capital system, has failed all over the world. It's failed in South Africa, and hence the high unemployment rate. So yeah, the Goldman Award has been very important for us because it's given us international recognition.
How do you work with the Richards Bay community?
We're working in Richards Bay with community. So we go there, we organize in the townships, in the communities, and we educate them, and we show them how to do things, and then give them ideas, and then provide resources. Then there's constant, if there's if there's things that they want, like airtime, data, whatever it is, transport, we cover all that to assist them to build up their struggles. Also to know, they must know that the struggle can only be won by them, and they must take ownership of the struggle. With support from us, but we don't own their struggle. So that's been very helpful in the sense that these big industries are going to areas where there's no voice, thinking they can get away with it, not realizing that we're following them all over and educating the community. And once that happens, then the revolution will start there too. There's no get away from these big corporations where they plundered the earth and destroyed our soil and waters and our common. So two-pronged attack. One is that we're fighting within the oil and gas in the ocean, where Zuma sold off the ocean. We're fighting that and trying to push back on big oil corporations. And we're happy to say that ExxonMobil has left South Africa through our efforts. The state oil corporation, Cecil, we are fighting them, we're challenging them, we're taking them to court. And the other one was the Eskom power thing in Richards Bay that the Gwedi Matasha has allowed. We have taken that to court as well. We've served papers on the company and government. So we are not going to allow them to come here once again. The colonialists will just destroy the land and the water, and people will be left in poverty. So we're getting all the working class and the poor people to come together and rise up. And that's been positive for us, that people will take ownership of everything and fight for what is rightfully theirs. And because they know now that they've had to bear the brunt of poverty, of unemployment, of no jobs, and the land and the water being destroyed.
Yeah, on the 4th of December, the engine refinery basically had an explosion. It was a huge explosion where communities of South Durban, beyond the fence line communities, they actually felt tremor, of which it was a huge impact on the communities, because what actually transpired, engine exploded due to the diesel plant, where it was a huge explosion in such a way that people from even Amanzimdodi, people from even Lamontville, they actually felt a tremor. And it was a big problem because we in eThekwini, there is no emergency evacuation plan for the communities of South Durban. In a case of an explosion, no one knows where they should go, no one knows what they should do, because there is nothing that actually informs them. But in the past, they were informed that they need to go to the Claywood Racecourse. But unfortunately, now the Claywood Racecourse has been sold, it's privatized. So there is no more a safe haven, as they were told to use Claywood Racecourse as the safe haven. So basically, it's so unfortunate because the issue of the emergency evacuation plan, it's still an issue that has not been solved for decades, and of which it's totally unacceptable because South Durban alone hosts a number of highly hazardous chemical industries. You were talking about the two major explosive industries, oil and chemical industries, engine and subref. There's a huge a number of paper and pulp mill and a host of different chemical industries, but unfortunately there is no emergency evacuation plan that informs the community in a case of an explosion and fire. For example, on the 4th of December, when this thing happened, no one knew what to do because the community, they were traumatized. They never knew what they should do. Should they run out of their homes? Should they lock their doors and be indoors? They never knew what they happened. But now
we continue to be present because as a movement, you would have to be present whenever your constituency, your people need you. Provide information, provide leadership at that time, to a point where there was another match end of last year which really dealt with corruption and evictions, but also violence against minority groups, migrant communities, women and children. That match was significant, and for the first time, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal sent a special delegation to receive our memorandum, but also the Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in KwaZulu-Natal sent the highest authority from the HOD himself at the office to receive that match. They were forced to engage with the shack dwellers. They were forced to engage with the street vendors, with the hostel dwellers and environmental activists and migrant communities. And from that match, we continue to engage with the city together with the provincial government, because at times the matches unlock windows of engagement which for a very long time would have been locked, because at that time engaging with the authorities was kind of locked, but that protest unlocked that. Then we had an opportunity again to engage, and those negotiations are still continuing, and we see the fruits of that. And of course, just before the recent arrest of Comrades Bonono, the Swedish government did an amazing stuff by awarding Abahlali with the Peenga Prize, which is a global and an international recognition for initiative of democracy and human rights. So they went all over the world, and Abahlali was nominated for the Peenga Award. So this was really a testament to the work that Abahlali and the coalition do. It was very clear from my first call that an engagement with the ambassador, Swedish ambassador. When I actually received that call, I made it clear that it was not just because suddenly individual is so clever. It was because of the collective work, the hard work. It was because of the warmth, the love, and the support from a number of comrades, including comrades from the coalition and a number of activists from